The hospital room was quiet, not peaceful quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like the air itself knows something has changed. I sat near the window with a bandage wrapped around my head and a paper cup of cold coffee untouched beside me. Outside, the city kept moving. Cars passed, people walked. Morning came like it always does. And I remember thinking something strange. How could the world keep going when mine had just stopped? My name is Raina, and this is the story of the day I stopped fighting for a place inside a family that never knew how to protect me and started building a life that finally protected me instead. For most of my life, I thought survival meant staying quiet. I thought strength meant enduring, keeping peace, smiling through pain, explaining away things that should never have needed explanations. He's just stressed. Families argue. He didn't mean it. Funny how people can shrink enormous pain into tiny sentences. And funny how eventually you start believing them. Until one day, something inside you finally says, no, no more. That morning in the hospital, a social worker sat beside me. She didn't rush, didn't fill silence with empty words. She simply looked at me and asked, "What do you want?" Nobody had asked me that before. Not really. I stared at her. Because when you've spent years surviving everyone else's choices, you forget you get to make your own. Finally, I whispered, "I'm not going back." She nodded, like she'd already seen the answer in my face. A few days later, I moved into a temporary shelter program. It wasn't glamorous. Shared rooms, warm tea, secondhand furniture, tiny windows. But for the first time in years, I slept without listening for footsteps. And I learned something surprising there. Pain has many faces. One woman missed her children, another missed herself. Someone else missed the version of life she thought she'd have. Different stories, same feeling. Loss, but also something else. Hope. Because every person there had one thing in common. They had chosen not to disappear. At night, we'd sit together in the common room. Blankets over our shoulders, teacups in our hands, talking about things people usually hide. Fear, regret, dreams. One evening, someone asked me, "What did you want to be growing up?" I laughed, not because it was funny, because I genuinely didn't know. Nobody had ever asked. I had spent so much time trying to survive that I forgot survival wasn't supposed to be a career. So I started asking myself difficult questions. Who am I? What do I enjoy? What would I do if I wasn't afraid? The answers didn't arrive dramatically. They arrived slowly, tiny pieces at a time. I liked writing. I liked speaking. I liked listening to people. I liked making someone feel less alone. One afternoon, a woman named Elise walked into the shelter carrying folders. She smiled and said, "We're looking for volunteers." I almost laughed. Volunteer? I was still rebuilding myself, but she handed me an application anyway. And somehow, I filled it out. It started small, greeting people, helping organize workshops, passing out coffee and notebooks. But then something unexpected happened. People started talking to me. Really talking, sharing stories they'd never said aloud. And I listened. Because listening had become my language. Years of watching rooms carefully had taught me something. Sometimes people aren't asking for advice. They're asking to be seen. Months later, Elise pulled me aside. She placed an envelope in front of me. Inside was an invitation. A community college wanted me to speak. My stomach dropped. Speak? In front of people? Absolutely not. Then Elise smiled. "You already have been." The room held maybe 30 people. Metal chairs, bright fluorescent lights, a microphone that worked only when it felt like cooperating. I stood there staring at faces I'd never seen before. Students, parents, people carrying invisible stories. My hands shook. Then I looked down at my notes, and suddenly I pushed them aside. because I realized something. I wasn't there to perform. I was there to tell the truth. So I did. I told them how silence can become a habit, how you start shrinking yourself just to avoid conflict, how you slowly disappear without realizing it. But I also told them this: you are not responsible for carrying pain that was handed to you. The room stayed silent. Then someone started clapping, then another, then everyone. Afterward, a young woman approached me, tears in her eyes, hands shaking. She said, "I thought I was the only one." 5 words, that's all. But those 5 words changed me, because suddenly my story wasn't just mine anymore. Invitations started coming: schools, community centers, organizations, panels, podcasts. Everywhere I went, I met people carrying invisible wounds. And every time someone shared their story, I saw pieces of myself, not the broken version, the rebuilding version, the version learning how to breathe again. The one day, I received an email from a nonprofit organization. They wanted me to join their advocacy team, writing, speaking, supporting people rebuilding their lives. I stared at the screen for a long time. Years ago, I thought my voice was something dangerous, something inconvenient. Now people were asking me to use it. Life kept changing, slowly, beautifully. I found my own apartment, tiny kitchen, mismatched furniture, plants by the windows, nothing expensive, but every inch felt earned, every wall felt safe. Months later, I stood on a stage in New York. Hundreds of people filled the room, bright lights, warm applause. And suddenly, I remembered the girl I used to be, the one who stayed quiet, the one who thought silence meant strength. I looked out into the crowd and smiled. Then I said, "I used to believe surviving was enough." I paused, but surviving isn't the destination. It's the beginning. After the event, an older woman approached me quietly. She handed me a photograph. Inside was a picture of her daughter. She held my hand and whispered, "Thank you for saying what she never got to." I couldn't speak, so I squeezed her hand back. Sometimes words aren't necessary. The weeks later, I returned home and found a small box waiting outside my apartment. No note, no explanation. Inside were old photographs, a childhood blanket, pieces of a life I thought had disappeared. I sat by the window holding them. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness, just understanding. Because healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering without breaking. That night, I opened a new journal. Blank page. Fresh start. At the top, I wrote, "She was never weak." Then underneath, "She was waiting to remember her voice." And today, I still speak. I still write. I still meet people rebuilding themselves. And every time someone asks how I found strength, I tell them the truth. I didn't find it. It was always there, buried under fear, buried under silence, buried under years of believing I had to become smaller just to be loved. Because here's what I know now: family isn't defined by who shares your last name. It's defined by who stands beside you when your world falls apart. Healing isn't loud. Sometimes it looks like small apartments, morning coffee, second chances, a microphone in trembling hands, a journal with page 1 still unwritten. And sometimes, the strongest thing you ever do isn't surviving what hurt you. It's deciding that your story deserves another chapter. And finally, giving yourself permission to write it.